And this is a Q&A portion of our webinar. We have about 5-7 minutes left for Q&A, and we do have a few questions that we perhaps can ask our presenters to help answer. The first question is, if a student needs to quarantine after their arrival to the university, can they quarantine in their own dorm room, or should they do it somewhere else?
That's a really good question. Students are able to quarantine in their own room. We would ask if you've been in contact with somebody, there is a self-report form for you to complete. So we just ask that you do that, and then we will follow up with instructions. But you would be able to quarantine. You would likely be able to quarantine in your own room.
Thank you very much. The next question would be probably for both off-campus and on-campus housing. So will the students be somehow notified that there are others in their building who were tested positive for COVID?
So for on-campus housing, if students, we do not send out an alert if your neighbors or your floor or even your building have individuals that have COVID. The university is sending out a report every Friday to everyone on campus of our campus numbers. But in order to keep their students' identities private and confidential, we do not send out individual information to the halls.
Yeah, similarly, it's probably unlikely that you would get that information living off campus. First, you have, no obligation to share your private medical information with your landlord or with your neighbors. And so therefore, if that information is shared, it's unlikely that, your neighbors or landlord would then share it out more broadly. So you probably wouldn't get any information about whether anybody in your building was quarantining due to COVID-19.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Then there is a question about the lease. So since students may be coming in January, they wonder if they have to sign a lease that lasts until July, or would it be a lease for an entire new year until the next January?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Most of the leases in Iowa City go from about August to July. So probably if you're coming in January, you would sign a lease that starts in January and ends in July. And then if you were staying in Iowa City, you would then sign a new lease for the following year. However, a lease is a contract that can be negotiated. And so if you were looking to sign a January to January lease, that's of course something that you could talk with your landlord about. But my guess is that the lease that you'd be looking at would be January to July.
Thank you very much for clarifying that. The next question is about how can students identify an off-campus apartment, or where they would go to look for off-campus housing?
Yeah, this is a really good question. We have an office on campus, off-campus housing. And so they have a really great website that offers a lot of information about available units. Sometimes landlords post there, often students post there when they're looking for people to take over their lease, or they're looking for roommates. So that's a really great place to start. And I'm happy to find that website and put it in the chat. Another option would be, Craigslist or social media, Facebook Marketplace, things like that. But I would definitely start with the university's off-campus housing website. And I'll find that website and put it in the chat.
Thank you so much again. The last question, or the next one, would be about the on-campus housing. And it would be on the question whether a student, if they arrive and if they don't have any bedding or any type of sheets for their bedding, how they could obtain something like that. Would the dining and housing department be able to help them with this?
Yeah, and so when it comes to bedding, typically we don't provide those in the residence halls. However, if depending on when a student arrives, they might be able to get those items from any of the local stores, whether it be Walmart, Target, etc. Another thing we've shared before is that if you're concerned that you might be arriving late when those stores are not open, you are also able to buy items online and mail those to yourself in advance. When you get your room assignment, typically we give you your mailing address for the hall, and so we are able to accept packages for you in anticipation of your arrival. When you arrive, our desk will be open and we can give you the items you sent. That way you have your bedding, pillows, or whatever you mailed to yourself.
Thank you so much. And one more question that just came on is whether the on-campus housing is available for graduate students too.
Residence hall living is for undergraduate students only, unfortunately.
But there are, I believe, campus, it's not a campus housing, but it's called, can you remind me?
Aspire Apartments.
Aspire Apartments, yeah, they're very close to campus, but they're not really, they don't belong to the university, but they're the closest sort of off-campus housing that's available for students and for graduate students specifically. Am I correct?
Yes, you're correct. We will refer graduate students that are looking for housing, we will refer them to Aspire, and I can put that link in the chat as well.
That would be perfect. Thank you so much, Brianne. I believe that closes, excuse me, that closes our Q&A portion of the webinar, and I will be sending a very quick message here in the chat function that is about a survey. We would like you to please complete a quick and brief survey and hear your feedback on today's webinar on the topic and whether you would like to hear something else. If you have any more questions, and please, you can contact us. Next slide, please. And next slide. You can contact us at the orientation email address, which is issss-orientation@uiowa.edu. And then I would like to also bring to your attention a good resource for you as a new international student, which you may have already seen and visited, but again, it can answer a lot of your questions, and that's a website, international.uiowa.edu/new-students. And the last slide is a reminder about the upcoming webinars. The next one is going to take place on December 4th, and we'll be focusing strictly on the orientation and what to expect. We will also discuss different placement tests, including the English proficiency placement test. So if you are interested to learn more about this topic, please make sure to register for this webinar and attend it. And the last webinar that we are preparing to air in January, just before students may be arriving or planning to travel to the US, that will be on January 8th. And this webinar will be specifically focusing on COVID-19 and the preparations for travel and living on the University of Iowa campus. Again, thank you to our presenters today for providing a lot of good information. And also, we would like to thank you, students, for attending the webinar. Please, again, if you have a moment, provide a feedback to the webinar for today, and thank you so much attending. Goodbye.